How's it going, everybody? My name is Jason. I'll be your host on this CFL talk show, Hussey's Huddle. In this video, we will be redrafting the 2010 CFL Draft, one of the more interesting classes that I've seen when looking through CFL drafts over the past 10 years. And I'm really excited to talk about this today. But really quickly before we get started, if you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is by hitting that like button or subscribing to Hussey's Huddle for more CFL content just like this. If you want to see more of these redrafts, be sure to hit that like button, guys. It lets me know that you like the content, and I will make more of these videos as we go further into the off season here. And with that said, let's get started. Before we dive into our redraft selections, I'm just going to talk about some of the more interesting facts about the CFL draft in 2010. Number one is the Ottawa Red Blacks were not yet a part of the league at this point, so obviously they didn't have any picks in this draft. Another thing is there were actually only 7 selections in the first round of this draft due to Hamilton forfeiting their pick to select offensive lineman Zach Carlson through the supplemental draft. And finally, this draft was really heavy on U Sports selections, with 36 picks compared to just 11 coming from the NCAA. And with that said, let's get into our redraft selections. Starting at number 1, we have the Saskatchewan Roughriders on the clock. Originally here, they took linebacker Shamari Williams out of Queens, who had a decent CFL career. He had a couple really decent seasons, but at the same time, he never really lived up to that number 1 pick expectation. And in this redraft, I'm going with offensive lineman Ryan Bombin out of Guelph, who was originally selected in the 4th round, 31st overall. It's close between a trio of offensive linemen, but Bombin had the highest ceiling combined with longevity in the 2010 draft. 155 games played, a 4-time divisional all-star. He was disappointing in 2019 with Toronto, and he remains unsigned here in 2021. He hasn't officially announced his retirement, but it still doesn't take away the several strong seasons that Bombin played in the league. Moving on to number 2, the Argos are on the clock, and the original pick here is offensive lineman Joe Appel out of Washington State, who never really did much in the league. And in this redraft, our selection is another offensive lineman, Patrick Neufeld out of the University of Saskatchewan, who was originally selected in the 5th round, number 33 overall. Again, somebody that's going significantly higher in this redraft. He's battled injuries throughout his career, but when on the field, Neufeld is one of the better run blockers in the CFL at the guard position. Him being inserted into Winnipeg's 2019 offensive line was a huge catalyst for the team's playoff run that season when they inserted him and Drew Delorier, the rookie, into those guard positions for them. It made a huge difference to the run game. So Neufeld with a great CFL career, and he goes significantly higher in this redraft. At number 3, once again, we have the Argos on the clock, and originally they selected linebacker Corey Greenwood out of Concordia, who would spend quite a few seasons in the NFL. I think it was 4 seasons in the NFL, and I've talked about him a lot in a previous video just dedicated to his career recently. But in the redraft, we're going to take offensive lineman Christian Matt out of Concordia, who was originally selected in the 1st round, 7th overall by the Montreal Alouettes. And he still remains in Montreal to this day. He's still an active player. Matt has never been a dominant player. His best season probably came in 2019. He just doesn't have that elite play strength, but at the same time has played his entire career with Montreal and remains a key component to their offensive line till this day. At number 4, the BC Lions are on the clock, and originally they took offensive lineman Danny Watkins out of Baylor, who was a major bust in this case, probably the biggest bust in this draft, given that he never even came to the league. He was actually a 1st-round pick at the Philadelphia Eagles under Andy Reid, and only played 1 season there, and then I believe he retired to become a firefighter. Nothing wrong with that, but just not what you expected when you invest a number 4 overall pick, or in the Eagles' case, a 1st-round NFL draft pick in Danny Watkins. In this redraft, we're going with linebacker Marc-Olivier Brulé out of Montreal. I'm sorry if I butchered that. Originally, he was selected in the 3rd round, number 23 overall by Montreal. Other guys are still active in the CFL, but Brulé had a higher peak than any of them. He returned plenty on investment for the Alouettes, whom he spent his first 7 seasons and made the CFL's divisional all-star team in 2016. He filled up the stat sheet as a bit of a Swiss Army knife with 8 sacks, 6 forced fumbles, and 5 interceptions over the course of his CFL career. At number 5, we have Calgary on the clock, and originally they took punter Rob Maver out of Guelph, who ended up being an outstanding pick. Even though you take a punter in the 1st round, that maybe not to be the most exciting thing, but he still counts as a Canadian player in this system that the CFL operates under. But in the redraft, due to positional importance, we're going with wide receiver Corey Watson out of Concordia, who was originally selected in the second round at number 9 overall. Like I said, the Stamps nailed the Maver pick originally, and we'll talk about him more shortly, but Watson has produced consistently at a more important position. He's never put up eye-popping numbers, but Watson has been a ridiculously consistent everywhere he's played in the CFL, catching 30 or more passes in 7 different CFL seasons as a player. That has always offered some level of starting appeal for CFL teams. At number 6, we have Edmonton on the clock, and originally they took defensive lineman Brian Bulkey out of Stanford. Bulkey had a decent career. I think he had about 10 career sacks, but he didn't really live up to that first-round pick billing overall. And in this redraft, we're going with linebacker Corey Greenwood out of Concordia, who was originally selected, like I said, in the first round at number 3 overall. A little bit of a drop here for Greenwood, who is still playing in the league a decade later. Why he finds himself a little lower in this redraft is simply because of injuries. He's just had so many of them. He just hasn't been able to stay on the field consistently. And I couldn't justify keeping him at number 3 or even higher than number 6 in this redraft scenario. But midway through the 2019 season, Greenwood was actually having an outstanding Canadian level season, but injuries again derailed him, and we're going to have to see if he can stay healthy here in 2021 as we go forward. At number 7, we have the Montreal Alouettes, who originally took offensive lineman Christian Matt out of Concordia. Of course, he was not there in this scenario, and so in the redraft, we're going to go with wide receiver Sean Gore out of Bishops, who was selected in the second round, number 10 overall. Gore's career was short-lived, only playing 5 seasons, but eclipsed 500 receiving yards in 4 of his 5 seasons with BC, while scoring 20 career touchdowns. Just had a really solid career for just a short time being in the league, and was just a reliable Canadian receiver that BC could throw out there on a weekly basis. Moving on to number 8, we have the Saskatchewan Roughriders on the clock. The original pick here is wide receiver Jordan Cisco out of Regina, who didn't really do much in the league, honestly. I think he had about 10 career catches or so when I looked it up. So in this redraft, we're actually going with punter Rob Maver out of Guelph. Say what you want about taking a punter in the first round, but Maver was actually one of the handful of players in this class to be named an all-star at some point in his career. But due to positional importance, he drops just a bit in this redraft scenario. Maver spent his entire career with the Stamps, proving him to be one of the best selections in this entire draft. At number 9, Winnipeg's on the clock, and the original pick here was Corey Watson of Concordia. With him gone, the redraft pick here is offensive lineman Jamichael Dean out of Michigan State, who was originally selected in the 3rd round, number 21 overall. Dean was never a star, but started a bunch of games in the CFL while winning 2 Grey Cups. Fun fact about Dean, he was actually one of the first Ottawa Redblacks ever being selected in the 2nd round of the 2013 expansion draft. And then moving on to our final pick in this redraft, at number 10, BC's on the clock, and the original pick here was wide receiver Sean Gore out of Bishops, who, as we mentioned earlier, is not on the clock by this point in this redraft. So in this redraft pick, we're going to go with defensive lineman Eddie Steele out of Manitoba. Steele, who played in games across 8 CFL seasons while producing 136 tackles and 19 career sacks from his defensive tackle position. Now, I just wanted to mention some guys that just missed the cut that had solid CFL careers. You got wide receiver Spencer Watt, who had decent production across a handful of CFL seasons, but was unable to really establish himself as a consistent starter. And then another honorable mention is Kachi Mwamba, the brother of Haynock. Kachi had a couple of decent years in the league and had 10 career interceptions, believe it or not. And then linebacker Shamari Williams, who had moments in the CFL, but overall really struggled to live up to his number 1 overall draft billing. He just missed the cut in this scenario. And then our final honorable mention is punter and kicker Grant Shaw, who put up 123 career-made field goals while handling punting duties across 6 CFL seasons. Just didn't have a high enough percentage on field goals attempted really to be considered for the top 10, but nonetheless, pretty good career for him. And with that, this concludes our first ever redraft here on Hussey's Huddle. Once again, my name is Jason. If you want to support the channel, and specifically this video, the best way to show your support is by hitting that like button or subscribing to Hussey's Huddle for more CFL content just like this. Thanks again for watching, guys. Appreciate all the support lately. We're on the way to 100 subscribers, and with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.